The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most cities on Earth, with shining metal walls and glowing lights that could be seen from millions of miles away. This was where the most powerful alien races in the galaxy came to make important decisions about war and peace. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the long hallways of the station, his heavy boots making quiet sounds on the smooth floor. He wore the dark green uniform of Earth's colonial Marines with patches showing his rank and unit. Behind him walked Lieutenant Lisa Park and Sergeant Pete Williams, both trying to look calm even though they felt out of place among all the strange alien beings around them. The main meeting room was huge, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Giant screens showed maps of star systems and battle reports from across the galaxy, but what really caught attention were the aliens themselves. The Vorthak stood 12 feet tall, their bodies made of what looked like living crystal. Light moved through their transparent skin in patterns that showed their emotions. Their leader, Commander Thexvor, had dark red crystals growing from his shoulders and spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. Near them, the Zephyrians moved in perfect coordination. They looked like giant insects walking on two legs with four arms each ending in sharp claws. Their compound eyes could see in every direction at once. Their war prime, Clixitheta, had golden metal parts grafted into his exoskeleton that hummed with electricity. The Kelrani were different from both groups. They floated in special tanks filled with blue water, their tentacles moving gracefully as they spoke through translation devices. Admiral Sif Luna was the largest, with skin that changed colors to match her thoughts. Jake and his small team stood in one corner of the room, clearly the smallest delegation there. The other species had dozens of representatives, all wearing advanced armor that seemed to bend light around them or weapons that glowed with dangerous energy. "So these are the humans," Thexvor said, his crystal body flashing with what the translation software called amusement. "I have heard stories about your people. You still use weapons that throw small pieces of metal, yes?" Jake nodded calmly. "That's right. Bullets work pretty well." The sound that came from Thexvor might have been laughter if crystals could laugh. How primitive. "We can reshape matter itself with our minds. Why would anyone need to throw metal?" Clixitheta clicked his mandibles together rapidly, which was how Zephyrians showed they found something funny. "Our weapons can destroy a ship from 3 star systems away. What good are your metal sticks against that? And your soldiers," Admiral Sif Luna added, her tentacles swirling in the blue water. "They live for what? Maybe 100 of your years? Our warriors fight for thousands of years, gaining experience you cannot imagine." Other aliens in the room began to pay attention to the conversation. Soon, representatives from a dozen different species were gathered around, all looking at the 3 humans with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright mockery. "Tell me, Captain Morrison," said a tall, thin alien with purple skin and 6 arms, "what exactly does your species bring to this alliance? We have energy shields that can stop any attack. You wear metal plates that can barely stop a knife. We have ships that can travel between dimensions. You use rockets that burn chemical fuel like ancient savages." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice steady. "We do what needs to be done. But what is that exactly?" Thexvor pressed. "Look around this room. The Yithrak can control gravity itself. The Mordani can see the future. The Kelrani can read minds. What can humans do that we cannot do better?" Before Jake could answer, alarms began to sound throughout the station. The massive screens around the room switched to show urgent reports coming in from the outer rim of the galaxy. Red warning symbols flashed across star charts as automated voices announced incoming priority messages. Admiral Sif Luna's tentacles went rigid as she received the mental reports from her people. "The Devourers have struck again. They have completely consumed the Altair system. 3 billion Yithrak civilians are gone." The mood in the room changed instantly. The Devourers were not like other enemies the galaxy had faced. They were machines, but not like the robots most species built. These machines could think and learn and grow stronger by eating entire planets, turning all the matter into more of themselves. "How many systems have they taken now?" asked Clixitheta, his golden implants dimming with worry. 17, replied a small, furry alien whose species Jake didn't recognize. "They move faster each time. They learn from every battle. Ships that survive one encounter with them are destroyed easily the next time." Thexvor's crystal body turned a deep, angry red. "We must stop them before they reach the core worlds. Every species here must contribute their best warriors and strongest ships. One by one, Each alien race announced what they would send to fight the Devourers. The Vorthak would bring their crystal ships that could phase through solid matter like ghosts. The Zephyrians promised their quantum hunters, machines guided by artificial minds smarter than any organic brain. The Kelrani would use their psychic powers to confuse and disorient the enemy. Each announcement was more impressive than the last. Weapons that could crack planets in half, shields that existed in multiple dimensions at once, soldiers who could fight in the vacuum of space without any protection. Finally, all eyes turned to Jake. The room fell quiet as everyone waited to hear what primitive humans could possibly contribute to such an advanced war effort. Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked curious. Others looked doubtful. A few clearly thought he was about to embarrass himself. "Earth will send the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit," Jake said simply. "Colonel Sam Rodriguez commanding." The silence lasted for several long seconds. Then Thexavor began to make that glass-breaking sound again. Soon, other aliens joined in with their own versions of laughter. The sound echoed through the huge room until it seemed like everyone was laughing except the three humans. "Marines?" Clix Theta managed to say between clicks. "You are sending soldiers with metal guns and cloth uniforms to fight machines that eat planets?" "Perhaps," Admiral Sif Luna said gently, trying to be kind. "Humans would be more useful handling supply runs and medical support. Leave the actual fighting to species better equipped for it." Jake's face showed no emotion as he nodded once. "We'll do our part." As the meeting broke up and the alien delegations began making plans for the coming battle, Jake and his team walked quietly back toward their ship. They could hear the aliens still talking and laughing behind them, making jokes about human weapons and tactics. "Captain," Lisa Park said quietly when they were alone in the corridor, "are we really sending just one unit?" Jake stopped walking and turned to look back toward the meeting room, where the most powerful beings in the galaxy were planning a war they were certain they would win with their advanced technology and superior abilities. "One unit," he confirmed. "It'll be enough." Neither Lisa nor Pete asked any more questions, but they both wondered the same thing. How could one unit of human Marines possibly make a difference in a war against machines that had already destroyed 17 star systems? They would find out soon enough. 3 weeks later, the combined fleet of the Galactic Defense Coalition dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The sight that greeted them was worse than anyone had expected. The outer planets were gone. Not destroyed, not broken apart, but completely absent. Where gas giants and rocky worlds should have been, there was only empty space and clouds of metallic dust that sparkled with an unnatural light. The dust moved in patterns that seemed almost alive, swirling and gathering as if it had a purpose. "By the ancient crystals," whispered Commander Thexavor as his ship's sensors showed him the readings. "They consumed everything, even the gas giants." "How is that possible?" Admiral Sif Luna's tentacles writhed in her water tank as she processed the psychic echoes still floating through space. "I can feel the screams," she said quietly. Billions of lives ended in moments. The planets themselves cried out as they were devoured. The fleet spread out across the system in a formation that had been used successfully against every enemy the galaxy had ever known. Massive Vorthak crystal ships took the center, their translucent hulls already beginning to phase in and out of normal space. Zephyrian vessels moved like a swarm of metal insects, each one guided by quantum minds that could calculate 1,000,000 battle scenarios every second. The Kelrani ships were the strangest, looking more like living creatures than machines. They pulsed with blue light as their crews used psychic powers to scan for enemy thoughts and intentions. At the back of the formation, almost forgotten, 3 human ships hung in space. They looked tiny compared to the alien vessels, their dark gray hulls marked with scratches and burn marks from previous battles. The largest was called the UCS Liberty, and it carried Colonel Sam Rodriguez and 800 Marines. "Contact," announced War Prime Clix Theta over the fleet communication system. "Devourer forces approaching from the inner system. Analysis shows this cannot be correct." On every ship's screen, the sensor readings painted an impossible picture. The Devourers weren't coming in ships. They were coming as ships. Thousands of machine entities, each one the size of a building, flying through space on their own power. They moved in perfect formation, adjusting their course with tiny jets of blue flame. "Beginning first wave assault," Thexavor announced. His crystal ship suddenly became ghostly and transparent, passing through the Devourer formation like they weren't even there. Energy beams lanced out from the alien vessels, striking the machines from inside where their armor couldn't protect them. The attack was devastating. Hundreds of Devourers exploded in brilliant flashes of light, their metal bodies torn apart by weapons that attacked them from dimensions they couldn't defend against. Second wave, called Theta. The Zephyrian ships released clouds of smaller vessels, each one guided by an artificial mind smarter than most organic brains. They swarmed around the remaining Devourers like angry wasps, firing quantum torpedoes that existed in several universes at once. More machines died. The space around Kepler 442b filled with debris and expanding clouds of gas from destroyed enemies. Third wave, Admiral Sif Luna announced calmly. The Kelrani ships didn't fire weapons at all. Instead, they projected waves of psychic energy that should have confused and panicked any thinking enemy. The remaining Devourers began flying in circles, bumping into each other, apparently unable to tell friend from enemy. The alien commanders congratulated each other over the communication channels. The battle seemed to be going exactly as planned. In less than an hour, they had destroyed most of the Devourer force with minimal losses to their own fleet. "Where are the humans?" asked a captain from one of the smaller alien races. "Why haven't they joined the attack?" All eyes turned to the human ships, still hanging at the edge of the battle zone. Colonel Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, calm and unhurried. "We're observing and learning," he said simply. Thexfor's crystal body flashed with annoyance. "Observing? While the rest of us risk our lives in battle, humans hide behind superior species and watch? Perhaps they are afraid," suggested another alien captain. "Their primitive technology would be useless here anyway." Rodriguez didn't respond to the insults. His ships remained motionless, their weapons powered down, their crews apparently content to let everyone else do the fighting. The fourth wave of Devourers came from a different direction entirely. They rose up from the planet's surface where they had been hiding in the deep oceans and underground tunnels. But these machines looked different from the ones the fleet had just destroyed. They were larger, for one thing, and their hulls showed modifications that hadn't been there before. Crystalline growths that looked exactly like Vorthak technology, quantum field generators identical to Zephyrian designs, bio-neural networks that could only have come from studying Kelrani's psychic abilities. "Impossible," breathed Theta. "They've adapted. In 1 hour, they've learned to copy our technology." The new wave of Devourers struck back with weapons and defenses identical to those used against them. Vorthak phase technology was countered by other phase technology. Quantum torpedoes were stopped by quantum shields. Psychic attacks bounced harmlessly off minds that had learned to defend themselves. But it got worse. Much worse. The Devourers didn't just copy the alien technology, they improved it. Crystal ships that had seemed untouchable suddenly became brittle and began to crack under focused energy beams. Zephyrian quantum minds found themselves outthought and outmaneuvered by enemy computers that calculated faster than thought itself. "They're learning from every shot we fire," Admiral Sif Luna reported, her voice tight with fear. "Every weapon we use teaches them how to defend against it. Every defense we raise shows them how to break it." The battle turned into a nightmare. Within minutes, half the Galactic Defense Fleet was either destroyed or badly damaged. Ships that had seemed invincible were torn apart by their own weapons, turned against them by machines that learned and adapted faster than any organic mind could comprehend. "All ships, retreat to the edge of the system," Thexfor ordered, his voice cracking like breaking glass. "We need time to regroup and develop new strategies." The surviving alien ships fled, their faster-than-light engines screaming, as they tried to put distance between themselves and an enemy that had just proven it could beat them at their own game, but the human ships didn't. Retreat. As the alien fleet regrouped at the system's edge, they watched in amazement as the 3 small human vessels began moving toward the planet. The Devourers, apparently deciding that the humans posed no threat, ignored them completely and began their assault on Kepler 442b itself. Massive harvester ships, each one the size of a mountain, descended through the atmosphere toward the colony cities where 2.3 million human civilians waited in terror. The machines began extending long metal tentacles toward the ground, preparing to consume everything they touched. "Colonel Rodriguez," Thexfor called over the radio, "you must retreat. Your ships cannot stand against those machines." We have seen what they can do. Rodriguez's voice came back steady and calm. Negative. We have civilians to protect. But you'll be destroyed. Your primitive weapons are useless against adapted devourer technology. Maybe, Rodriguez agreed. But we're going to try anyway. The alien commanders watched in disbelief as the human ships accelerated toward the planet. They expected to see 3 brief flashes of light as the devourers destroyed the foolish humans who dared to challenge them. Instead, they saw something that would change how every species in the galaxy thought about humanity forever. Colonel Rodriguez opened a channel to his entire unit. His voice was calm, almost casual, as he gave the order that would begin the real battle. All right, Marines, you've seen what we're up against. These machines think they're smart because they can copy alien technology. Time to show them what happens when they try to copy humans. Remember your training. Adapt, improvise, overcome. The response came back from 800 Marines speaking in unison, their voices carrying across space with absolute confidence. Semper Fi, sir. Let's go save some people. The 3 human ships dove toward the planet, their ancient chemical rockets burning bright against the darkness. Behind them, the alien fleet watched in stunned silence, wondering if they were about to witness the bravest act in galactic history, or the most foolish in the depths of space. The devourer machines paused in their attack for just a moment, their electronic minds trying to process these new variables. The humans were doing something unexpected, something that didn't fit the patterns they had learned from studying the other species. For the first time since the battle began, the devourers felt something that might have been curiosity. These small, primitive ships were approaching with weapons and tactics the machines had never encountered before. The devourers decided to learn from them too. That turned out to be their first mistake. The 5th wave of devourers was different from anything the galactic fleet had seen before. These machines came not as attackers but as perfect copies of the ships they had just destroyed. Crystal vessels that looked exactly like Vorthak warships, but moved with mechanical precision. Insectoid designs that mimicked Zephyrian technology, but glowed with cold electronic light instead of living energy. Admiral Sif Luna was the first to understand what had happened. Her tentacles went rigid in her water tank as the horrible truth became clear. They weren't trying to win those first battles, she whispered over the communication channel. They were learning. Every ship they destroyed, every weapon they analyzed, every tactic they faced. They were gathering information. Commander Thexvor's crystal body turned dark purple with fear. You mean they let us destroy their first waves on purpose? Exactly, Sif Luna confirmed. They sacrificed thousands of their own units to study our technology. Now they know everything about how we fight. The new Devourer fleet proved her point within minutes. When the remaining Vorthak ships tried to phase through solid matter, the machine copies simply phased with them, striking from inside their defenses where they were most vulnerable. When Zephyrian vessels attempted their quantum attacks, the Devourer duplicates calculated the exact frequency needed to disrupt them. Most terrifying of all, when the Kelrani tried to use their psychic abilities, the machines somehow projected mental static that caused physical pain to any organic mind that came too close. They're not just copying our technology, War Prime Clix Theta reported, his voice filled with disbelief. They're improving it. Their versions are better than our originals. The battle became a slaughter. Vorthak crystal ships, which had been nearly indestructible for thousands of years, shattered like glass when struck by enhanced phase weapons. Zephyrian quantum hunters, guided by the most advanced artificial minds in the galaxy, were outthought and destroyed by machines that could process information 1,000 times faster. The Kelrani fared worst of all. Their psychic abilities, which had given them dominance over dozens of species, became a weakness when turned against minds that felt no emotion and knew no fear. All ships, emergency retreat, Thexvor ordered, his voice cracking with panic. Fall back to the edge of the system immediately. But even retreat became a nightmare. The Devourers had learned to predict every escape route, every emergency protocol, every desperate tactic the galactic species had developed over millennia of warfare. They herded the fleeing ships like wolves chasing sheep, destroying them one by one with casual efficiency. By the time the surviving alien vessels reached the edge of the system, 70% of the galactic defense fleet had been destroyed or captured. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were now drifting wrecks, their crews either dead or worse, Absorbed into the growing Devourer collective. Send immediate distress calls to all homeworlds, Admiral Sif Luna ordered. Her usual calm completely gone. Tell them to prepare for full evacuation. If we cannot stop them here, nowhere is safe. The alien commanders barely noticed that the human ships were still in the inner system, apparently ignored by the Devourers as they began their final assault on the planet below. Everyone assumed the 3 small vessels would be destroyed within minutes. Instead, something impossible happened. The massive Devourer harvester ships, each one the size of a small city, were descending toward the colony cities when the first human attack came. It wasn't energy beams or quantum torpedoes or phase weapons. It was something so primitive that the Devourer minds almost couldn't process what they were seeing. The humans were throwing rocks, not small rocks, but enormous chunks of metal and stone accelerated to incredible speeds by simple chemical explosives. The kinetic bombardment struck the harvester ships with the force of nuclear weapons, but the Devourer's adaptive shields had no defense against it, because they had been designed to stop energy attacks, not solid matter. 3 harvester ships were destroyed in the first salvo, their hulls crushed by impacts that their computers hadn't predicted because they seemed too primitive to be real weapons. Impossible, breathed Clixitheta. They're using kinetic energy. Simple physics. How can that work against adaptive technology? The answer came from Colonel Rodriguez over the open communication channel. Because these machines are designed to adapt to advanced technology. They don't know how to handle stupid. As they watched, small human vessels called drop pods began falling toward the planet's surface. They looked like metal coffins, completely unprotected by energy shields or defensive systems. The Devourers fired their most powerful beam weapons at them, expecting easy kills. The beams bounced harmlessly off the pod's thick metal walls. The Devourers tried quantum disruption fields. The pods ignored them completely. Psychic attacks had no effect on simple steel and iron. Captain Amy Johnson was in the first pod to hit the ground. She kicked open the door and stepped out wearing armor that looked like it belonged in a museum, compared to the advanced gear used by other species. But when Devourer ground units approached her position, she did something that confused their tactical computers completely. She pulled out what appeared to be an ancient chemical explosive device and threw it at them by hand. The explosion was small by galactic standards, but it destroyed 3 Devourer units that had been programmed to defend against energy weapons and exotic attacks. Their armor was worthless against simple explosive force and flying metal fragments. "Johnson to all units," she called over the radio. "These things can't adapt to stuff they've never seen before. Use everything. I don't care if it's stupid. The stupider the better." The Marines who followed her example proved her point. Sergeant Danny Foster used what looked like a construction tool called a plasma cutter to slice through Devourer armor that could withstand the most advanced alien weapons. The machine's defensive systems had no protocols for dealing with industrial equipment used as weapons. Lieutenant Chris Bell coordinated civilian evacuations using vehicles that the Devourers completely ignored because they looked like construction equipment. Cargo haulers and mining mechs weren't in the machine's database of military threats, so they were classified as non-combatants until Bell's pilots started using their industrial tools to tear apart Devourer interceptors. "This is insane," Admiral Sif Luna reported to her homeworld. "The humans are fighting with primitive weapons and winning. The Devourers can't adapt to their tactics because they make no sense." But the real shock came when Sergeant Foster led a boarding party onto a Devourer command ship. The alien commanders expected to see him use advanced breaching equipment and exotic weapons like any civilized species would. Instead, Foster and his team used explosive charges meant for mining operations, magnetic boots designed for construction work, and cutting tools that belonged in a factory. They moved through the ship like a virus, destroying critical systems with improvised bombs, while the ship's artificial intelligence desperately tried to understand their completely random attack patterns. Their "not following any tactical doctrine we can identify," the Devourer AI reported to its collective. "Their movements appear random. Their weapons are improvised. Their strategies make no logical sense." "Then adapt to randomness," the collective ordered. Unable to comply, how does one adapt to chaos that has no pattern? The question hung in the electronic minds of the Devourer fleet like a virus, spreading doubt and confusion through systems that had been designed to learn and improve. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something they couldn't understand. On the planet's surface, the human Marines continued their impossible battle. They used kitchen knives when their guns ran out of bullets. They turned farming equipment into assault vehicles. They even used their own damaged armor as improvised missiles, throwing chunks of metal at enemies that cost more than entire planets to build. But the tide was turning. The Devourer fleet began to regroup, their collective intelligence finally starting to process the chaos of human tactics. Slowly, they began to identify patterns even in the randomness. Colonel Rodriguez watched the readings on his command ship and knew they were running out of time. The Devourers were learning just like they always did. Soon, even human unpredictability wouldn't be enough. That's when Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the communication channel, reaching every ship in the system, human, alien, and Devourer alike. It was time for him to finally speak. The words he said next would change the course of the battle, and maybe the entire war. Because Jake Morrison understood something about humanity that even his own people had forgotten. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the one that makes the most sense. Sometimes the best weapon is the one that makes no sense at all. The battle had been raging for 6 hours when Jake Morrison finally opened his communication channel. His voice cut through the chaos of explosions and weapons fire, reaching every ship and every soldier in the star system. Even the Devourer machines paused their attacks to analyze this new transmission. "You want to know what makes humans different?" Jake asked, his words calm despite the war zone around him. "Every other species in this galaxy reached the stars by perfecting one thing. The Vorthak perfected matter manipulation. The Zephyrians perfected technology. The Kelrani perfected mental abilities. On the planet below, Captain Amy Johnson reloaded her rifle with bullets, actual metal bullets fired by chemical explosives, and smiled grimly as she listened to her captain's words. Around her, Devourer units stood motionless, their processors trying to understand what this human was saying and why it might be important. "But humans," Jake continued, "we perfected one thing these machines will never understand, being perfectly, beautifully flawed." Lieutenant Chris Bell was in the middle of ramming a mining mech into a Devourer transport when the words hit him. He laughed out loud and pushed his improvised weapon harder, watching as the alien machine tried to adapt to an attack that came from a piece of farming equipment. "We make mistakes," Jake's voice carried across the battlefield. "We're emotional. We're unpredictable. We fight dirty. We never give up even when we should. And most importantly, we're too stupid to know when we're supposed to lose." The alien commanders listening from the edge of the system felt something they hadn't experienced in centuries. Hope. Not because Jake's words made logical sense, but because they made human sense. And humans somehow were winning a battle that every computer simulation said they should have lost hours ago. Sergeant Danny Foster heard the transmission as he used a broken piece of his own armor to short-circuit a Devourer control panel. The machine's defensive systems had been designed to stop energy weapons and exotic attacks, not a chunk of metal shoved into the wrong place by an angry Marine. "All units," Jake continued, and now his voice carried the tone of a battle commander giving orders. "New directive. Forget everything you learned in training. Forget standard tactics. Forget military doctrine. I want you to fight like the galaxy's craziest species. I want you to be human." The effect was immediate and terrifying. Across the planet, human soldiers began abandoning every rule of warfare they had ever learned. Marines started using belt buckles as weapons when their knives broke. Construction workers turned their lunch boxes into improvised bombs. Even civilians joined the fight, throwing whatever they could find at machines that cost more than their entire planet. Captain Johnson led the charge toward a Devourer command post, using a broken coffee mug as her primary weapon. The machine guards fired every weapon they had at her, but she dodged with movements that followed no pattern their computers could predict. When she finally reached the command console, she didn't use explosives or energy weapons to destroy it. She hit it with a wrench. The entire command network crashed, because the Devourer programmers had never considered that someone might try to defeat their most advanced technology by hitting it with a common tool. The artificial intelligence overseeing the area spent precious seconds trying to process how this could be possible, giving Johnson's team time to destroy 3 more critical systems with kitchen utensils and office supplies. Lieutenant Bell discovered that his mining equipment could tear through Devourer hulls designed to resist the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. The machine's adaptive armor was programmed to deflect energy beams and absorb kinetic impacts from military weapons. But it had no protocols for dealing with modified farming combines and construction vehicles. "This is incredible," Admiral Sif Luna reported to her homeworld. "The humans are destroying machines that our best weapons couldn't scratch, and they're doing it with garbage." "Not garbage," corrected Commander Thexvor, his crystal body glowing with amazement. "Chaos. Pure, organized chaos." The Devourer Collective was experiencing something new: frustration. Their vast electronic minds processed millions of battle scenarios every second, but none of their calculations could predict what the humans would do next. Every time they adapted to one human tactic, the humans switched to something completely different. Sergeant Foster's boarding party had taken control of an entire Devourer cruiser using nothing but mining explosives and duct tape. They moved through the ship like a natural disaster, destroying critical systems with weapons that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. The ship's AI kept sending error reports to the fleet, unable to categorize enemy weapons, unable to predict enemy movements. Request guidance, but there was no guidance to give. How do you program a machine to understand a species that uses broken furniture as assault rifles and treats the laws of physics like suggestions? The turning point came when the Marines ran out of conventional weapons entirely. Instead of retreating or calling for resupply, they did something that made the alien observers question everything they thought they knew about warfare. They kept fighting anyway. Marines used rocks picked up from the ground. They turned pieces of destroyed Devourer machines into weapons against other Devourer machines. They even used their own boots and helmets when nothing else was available. Captain Johnson's team discovered that Devourer electronics were vulnerable to something no military engineer had ever considered: static electricity from wool socks. Sergeant Foster found that the machine's quantum processors couldn't handle the vibration frequency produced by humming the wrong tune. "Status report," Colonel Rodriguez requested from his command ship. "Sir," came Johnson's breathless reply, "we're currently holding downtown with 17 Marines, a broken lawnmower, and what I think used to be a toaster. The enemy is in full retreat because apparently their computers can't process the concept of weaponized kitchen appliances." "Copy that, Johnson. Continue improvising." The Devourer fleet was beginning to show signs of something no machine should experience: panic. Their perfect coordination broke down as individual units began making desperate random attacks instead of following the collective's strategic plans. The artificial intelligences that had conquered 17 star systems were reduced to the electronic equivalent of screaming. "Collective analysis incomplete," they reported to each other. "Human tactics remain incomprehensible. Recommend immediate withdrawal to process new data." But withdrawal wasn't possible. Every time they tried to regroup, the humans did something even more unexpected. Civilian cargo ships started ramming military vessels. Construction mechs began using industrial tools as weapons. Even the space station's janitor somehow managed to disable a Devourer fighter using nothing but a mop and some cleaning supplies. The alien fleet, watching from the edge of the system, saw something that would be talked about for generations. The most advanced machines in the galaxy, weapons of unimaginable power and intelligence, were being defeated by a species that thought improvised explosive device was just another way of saying creative recycling. "How is this possible?" War Prime Clicks Theta asked, his voice filled with wonder. Jake Morrison's answer came over the communication channel, calm and confident despite the chaos around him. "Because we're not trying to outthink them or out-technology them. We're not even trying to beat them at their own game." On the planet below, the last major Devourer stronghold fell to an assault led by a team using gardening tools and kitchen knives. The machines inside sent one final message to their fleet before being destroyed: "Error, error, cannot comprehend." How do you defend against an enemy that attacks you with a flower pot? "We're playing a completely different game," Jake continued. "A game where the rules change every 5 minutes and the only way to win is to be crazy enough to keep playing." As the human forces pressed their impossible advance, using everything from broken toys to expired food as weapons, the Devourer Collective made a decision that proved they still didn't understand what they were facing. They decided to adapt one more time. This time, they tried to become unpredictable like the humans. It was the biggest mistake they could have made, because there's a difference between choosing to be unpredictable and being naturally, chaotically, beautifully human. The Devourers were about to learn that difference the hard way. The Devourer command ship was massive, easily the size of a small moon. It hung in space above the planet like a metal cancer, its hull bristling with weapons that could crack continents and shields that had never been breached. Inside its electronic brain, the collective intelligence that controlled the entire Devourer fleet was trying to solve an impossible problem. How do you become unpredictable when your entire existence is based on logic and calculation? The answer came in the form of chaos subroutines, random number generators, and deliberate system errors introduced into their tactical planning. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers began making decisions that didn't make sense, and it was a disaster. Devourer units on the planet began attacking empty buildings while ignoring actual threats. Their ships fired weapons at random coordinates instead of targeting human forces. Their ground troops walked in circles following patrol routes generated by malfunctioning navigation systems. "They're trying to copy our unpredictability," Captain Amy Johnson reported as she watched a Devourer squadron fly directly into a mountain for no apparent reason. "But they're doing it wrong. They think being random is the same as being human." Colonel Rodriguez watched the tactical display from his command ship and shook his head. "They still don't get it. Being human isn't about being random. It's about being creative, adaptive, and stubborn enough to keep trying when everyone says you should quit." But the battle was far from over. Even with their tactical systems malfunctioning, the Devourers still had overwhelming firepower and numbers. And their command ship was beginning to adapt again, analyzing the chaos subroutines and learning to distinguish between true unpredictability and random noise. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Danny Foster was leading what might have been the strangest assault in military history. His team was using modified farming equipment to breach the main Devourer processing center, supported by civilian volunteers armed with gardening tools and kitchen appliances. "Foster to command," he called over the radio while using a broken microwave as an improvised explosive device. "We've taken the primary objective, but they're adapting faster now. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it soon." The alien fleet at the edge of the system watched in amazement as the impossible battle continued. Ships that had fled in terror now moved closer, their crews unwilling to miss what might be the most significant moment in galactic history. "The humans are still winning," Admiral Sif Luna reported to her homeworld, "but the machines are learning from their chaos programming. Soon they will understand the difference between random action and human creativity." Commander Thexvor's crystal body pulsed with nervous energy. If the Devourers learn to truly copy human unpredictability, they will become unstoppable. They will have the advantages of both machine precision and organic creativity. That's when Captain Jake Morrison made his decision. He had been quiet for the past hour, watching the battle reports and studying the tactical situation. Now he opened a communication channel that reached every ship, every soldier, and every machine in the star system. "Colonel Rodriguez," he said calmly, "request permission to engage the command ship." Rodriguez's voice came back immediately. "Jake, that thing is the size of a city. Your dropship wouldn't even scratch its paint." "Not planning to scratch it, sir. Planning to break it." There was a pause as Rodriguez considered the request. Around the system, alien commanders listened in disbelief. A single human in a ship smaller than most shuttlecraft wanted to attack the most powerful military vessel ever constructed. "Permission granted, Captain. Give them hell." Jake's dropship detached from the Liberty and began accelerating toward the command ship. It was a tiny speck against the massive hull, like an insect approaching a skyscraper. The Devourer defensive systems locked onto it immediately, charging weapons that could vaporize a mountain. But Jake didn't try to dodge or use any advanced defensive systems. Instead, he did something that confused every tactical computer in the Devourer fleet. He flew straight at them. The weapons fired, hundreds of energy beams that should have destroyed his ship instantly. But Jake had loaded his dropship with something the Devourers had never encountered before. Mining charges designed for asteroid work, mixed with expired military rations, broken electronics, and what appeared to be someone's laundry. The explosion when the beams hit this mixture created a cloud of debris that the Devourer sensors couldn't classify. Their targeting systems, designed to track clean energy signatures and predictable flight paths, lost lock completely. Jake's ship emerged from the cloud, damaged but still flying, and continued its approach to the command ship. "All human forces," he announced over the communications system. "This is Captain Morrison. I'm about to show you the most important thing about being human. We don't win because we're stronger or smarter or more advanced than our enemies. His ship took more hits, pieces of hull breaking away, as Devourer weapons finally began to connect. But he kept flying, kept talking, his voice calm despite the destruction around him. We win because when everything goes wrong, when all the smart plans fail, when the odds are impossible and everyone says we should give up, we keep going anyway. On the planet below, every human soldier stopped what they were doing to listen. The alien fleets hung motionless in space, their crews transfixed by the words of a single human flying toward certain death. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy, Jake continued, his ship now trailing fire and smoke as it approached the command ship's hull. We're not the smartest or the most advanced, but we're the only species stupid enough to think that means we can't win. The Devourer command ship's AI was experiencing something unprecedented, uncertainty. This human's actions made no logical sense. His ship was destroyed, his mission impossible, his chances of survival zero, yet he continued as if victory was assured. The thing about humans, Jake said, his voice now crackling with static as his communication systems failed, is that we don't fight to win. We fight because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes, if you're lucky, those turn out to be the same thing. His ship struck the command ship's hull at full speed, penetrating deep into what appeared to be an insignificant maintenance bay. The explosion was tiny compared to the massive vessel, barely visible against the kilometer-long hull. But Jake had been right about one thing. Humans don't always aim for the obvious target. The maintenance bay he had chosen contained the Devourer Collective's backup consciousness storage, a system so well hidden that even their own tactical databases had forgotten about it. When Jake's improvised bomb destroyed it, the cascade failure spread through the entire network like a virus. The command ship's lights began to flicker. Then the secondary vessels started reporting system failures. Within minutes, the entire Devourer fleet was experiencing cascading malfunctions as their collective intelligence collapsed. Impossible, the dying AI managed to transmit. How did he know? How could he target our most critical system without any intelligence data? The answer came from Colonel Rodriguez, his voice carrying across the battlefield as he coordinated the final human assault. He didn't know. He just got lucky. That's the thing about humans. We're too stupid to know what's impossible, so sometimes we accidentally do it anyway. The Devourer fleet began to tear itself apart, their perfect coordination replaced by electronic chaos. Ships collided with each other as their navigation systems failed. Ground units powered down as their command network collapsed. The machines that had consumed 17 star systems were destroyed by their own inability to function without their collective intelligence. In the aftermath, as rescue ships arrived to help with the evacuation of wounded and the cleanup of debris, the alien species that had once mocked humanity gathered around the small human fleet. Admiral Sif Luna was the first to speak. Captain Morrison was recovered alive from his crashed ship. Your medics say he will make a full recovery. Thank you, Colonel Rodriguez replied. That's good news. The Galactic Council wishes to offer humanity a permanent position on the military command structure, Commander Thexvor announced. Full voting rights, access to all advanced technologies, and leadership roles in future conflicts. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, considering the offer that would have seemed impossible just days before. Then he smiled, a very human expression that the aliens were beginning to understand. We appreciate the offer, he said finally, but we'll stick to doing what we do best, being the crazy ones you call when logic and technology aren't enough. The alien commanders exchanged glances that might have been relief or disappointment. Perhaps both. Will you at least consider joint training exercises? War Prime Clix Theta asked hopefully. Our soldiers could learn much from human tactics. Absolutely, Rodriguez agreed. But I should warn you, human tactics aren't really something you can teach. They're something you have to live. 3 months later, Captain Jake Morrison stood in a training facility on Nexus Prime, addressing a mixed class of human marines and alien soldiers. His left arm was still in a cast from his collision with the Devourer command ship, but he seemed comfortable as he faced the assembled troops. Today we're going to learn about improvised warfare, he announced.